Continue refactoring Futurecam. For those of you who are new to this series of videos which I've posted as a playlist, this is the playlist for those of you who would like to catch up on the earlier videos in this series, and there are 57 of them. All of them demonstrate refactoring Futurecam, which is an iPhone photography app. The principles I'm talking about apply to all platforms, so you should watch it even if you're a back-end or front-end engineer or any other stack. This is Futurecam. It has these features like liquid shutter and so on, which you can check on the website, which I'll link in the description. All the refactorings I've done so far have been done on a Windows laptop since I didn't have a Mac. So I used VS Code without a Swift compiler because Apple's toolchain runs only on the Mac. As a result, I committed a whole bunch of compiler errors. For this video, I borrowed a Mac from a friend. So we are going to use Xcode and Apple's toolchain. And we are going to start with 306 errors. But some of them are trivial. There, now we are down to 304. And there is a missing number, there's a parenthesis or a braces mismatch somewhere. Okay, this is fine. This is fine. We'll get to it later. This is closing in main queue, this is closing this, and this is closing this. But we are missing this. We need to close this. Now you can see from the indentation itself the problem. There you go. I hope I have set the indentation to 2. Sorry, new editor, indentation. So this should be taken care of. Command B builds. Okay, 4 errors have disappeared. Static stored properties not supported in protocol extensions. So basically, for those of you who are not into Swift, I was going to open Sublime here, but anyway, never mind. I'll just use this as a temporary text editor. In a class or in an extension or protocol or anything, there are 2 ways of doing this. You can say static let a equal to 1. This is called a stored property. Forget even static. Let's just get back to basics. Or var if it is mutable. But let's assume it's immutable. This is a stored property, which means some storage is allocated to it. It's a variable. Or you can have a computed property where you say var a int and then you say return 1. This is called a computed property. It looks like a variable. The syntax is that of a variable, but when you read it, this code executes. It's a getter function. So that's what we mean by stored and computed properties. I'm just explaining the terminology so that you can follow along even if you don't know the Swift terminology. Okay, so here you can't have a static stored property, which is not a problem. This should work. Oh yeah, it has to be var. Okay, 299, 1 error is gone. Let's skip all of these. Let's collapse all of these. Oops. Swift compiler warning. Okay. Yeah, so here, let me also describe what class vars mean. So again, I use this as a text editor. So here, let's say we have a base class or a protocol. A protocol for Java engineers is called an interface. It just declares some functions that all classes that implement the protocol must implement, right? So it just specifies a bunch of signatures. Payment method, right? It could be a credit card or a debit card or whatever it is, right? So you can have a function called charge amount double. Like, you shouldn't represent money using doubles because it's inaccurate, but let's leave that aside for now. So this could be a function, and you could have different classes that implement this payment method. And the code, right? And you could also have a debit card, right? You can have different payment methods. Now you can also have a static property, static var default method, which returns a payment method, right? You won't have it in a protocol, but let's assume this is a class. Let's keep it simple, like an abstract class. Which will return the default, or it could also be something else like, yeah, whatever, right? We'll go back to a protocol. Or it could also be something like a are payments enabled. Right? Now this one is not redefined in each of these classes. There's only one, right? It cannot be overridden. And if it is, if this class declares something like this with some implementation, right? Now I wish I could disable the compiler for this. Now the compiler is kind of interrupting us more than helping us, because this is not intended to compile, right? So now if you have an is are payments enabled in payment method and credit card, we'll just say is enabled or something. Okay, never mind, forget the name. And you have one more here, static var are payments enabled bool. Now these are all independent, they are not overriding each other because statics can't be overridden. So you do debit card dot are payments enabled or credit card dot are payments enabled, right? There is no concept of overriding when it comes to static. Now suppose there is a class property which Swift supports, which languages like Java don't. Here if you specify class var is, I know, credit, let's say, or is debit, whichever. Here class var is credit bool returns true. This is a credit type of a payment. This would return false. And if you have other type of payment instruments, like one of these buy now pay later startups, that would also return true for is it a credit. And this can be overridden. That's the difference between class and static. Static can't be overridden, it's just a namespace, but class can be overridden. But it doesn't have access to self or this. So here you can access self dot something, right? You can access the instance variables of the object. So you can say, so if you have something, I don't know, limit, let's say private let payment limit equal to whatever, 80,000. Here you can check this, if amount less than payment limit, get payment limit from server, right? because each person has a different payment limit on their credit card. So you can check this way because you have access to self. In class, you don't have access to self, but it can be overridden. So the self is used to dispatch. So this is what it is. So here we have this we have this class because they are overridden in each of the modes, like burst mode or something, like user description, file base name, right? All of these. So user description is the thing that shows in the UI. So you have different modes like time lapse and video and photo and so on. Each of them has a name that comes up in the UI. That is this. I made it class because it is independent of the particular instance. So if I'm in time lapse mode, it shows time lapse mode in the UI. Then if I go to some other mode, let's say light rail mode, and then I come back to time lapse mode, a different time lapse mode object is created. So that is why we don't need reference to self. Anyway, Swift doesn't permit this. So we'll make them instance properties. I think sometimes you should use the required keyword, sometimes you shouldn't. I guess that's what the Swift compiler is saying here. It didn't like me using the required keyword for init. Okay. Now how are we doing? Oops. Yeah. For this, there's a Stack Overflow answer. And you have to learn these magic incantations. I don't know when to use .self, when to use .type, when to use none of them. So here you get protocol.type. You're supposed to say as question mark. Let's see. I never know what to use when. Still objects to this? No? No. Ease, you can use ease. Okay, it's happy with this. There is update oh, did I remove it? Okay, we'll get to those later. It should work. Value of optional type. AV capture device must be unwrapped to a value. You get these annoying errors that logically don't mean anything. So it's easier to write it as an if ladder, I guess. Equal to dot delete. Does this work? Yeah. Let's not introduce more abbreviations like CAM. If you do, then someone will look at this and say, why should this not be preferred CAM? So make it consistent. Else if camera equal to dot ultra wide toggle dot is selected equal to true. Else if camera equal to dot front toggle dot is selected equal to true. Else this should work. Yes. If it is time lapse mode dot type, can I just do this if it is time lapse mode? Yeah, no, it's a meta type. There is a concept called a meta class, which is a class that represents. So if you have a class and you have a bunch of instances of that class, then you can ask the question, what is the class an instance of? It's an instance of another class called a meta class, which is very hard to understand, so we won't try to understand it here. Okay, what's the magic incantation? If current mode type is whatever dot type. Yeah, we'll deal with these exhauster switches later on. Maybe we can even delete these extensions. You have to import core graphics. CG, whenever you see a prefix, it's core graphics. I think it's nested within something else. Oh, image IO. Same thing, right? CG image property orientation. Was there a typo? Oh, there are two images. No, obviously it didn't work. So it's not a question of core graphics, I guess. Like Swift convention says you should import it. You shouldn't rely on indirect imports. So like one of these imports core graphics. So you don't need to import it again, but that's a bad practice. Anyway, what's the problem here? I'm not going to run it on the iPhone. I'll be content with just compiling it. fact, I'm using the iPhone as a webcam using this excellent software called Camo. So I can't run the app on it because it will disrupt the webcam. Anyway, coming back. These are no longer class. Oh, why does it not conform to protocol mode? I have no idea what this means. Candidate. What did it do? It made some change to the code. Oh, we don't need to use override because this is a protocol. So a class can have only one base class, which is this, and it can implement any number of protocols like this. Override means there's already an implementation which you are overriding, which is the case for the base class, but not for the protocol. Very weird and random. Okay, it's giving some. This callback has to have one argument. You can ignore it, but you have to do this. Yeah, we'll Google for these later on. Oh, there is no device, right? Let's start with the non-statics here, then we can move on to the statics. You should have some logical order. Okay. So here, since we don't have a reference to the device, okay, so let me explain to you this concept of an extension. A protocol only declares signatures like this. In fact, let's start with init. You begin by initializing a class, only then you work with it. So it has all of these initializers, properties, and functions. These are only signatures. There is no implementation. However, you can have an extension where you provide default implementations. This default implementation is empty, for example. This one returns some value. So the idea is that any class that does not explicitly implement this will get the default implementation as a convenience. That's the extension. That's why you have a protocol and an extension. Now here, you don't have access to this. So you can't provide this default implementation. So you have to do it here. We'll just keep this here as a comment. Actually, we'll take care of it right now. Now if you go to Command Shift O, open quickly, yes, burst mode, you're going to declare a ideal exposure duration and you're going to return this. In all of them, I think except burst mode, yes, burst mode overrides it to return something else. So except burst mode. Let's start with long exposure mode. Let's see if this works. This is a law of Demeter violation. You shouldn't have A dot B dot C dot D. That means none of these are encapsulated. In this case, the device is an AV capture device, which is an iOS class. So we are not in control of it. It has this property active format, which has this property this. So that's okay. Off. Information hiding, least privilege. So here, these two dots are not under our control. This is just a helper method on session. So even if you remove this, someone can write the code. It's just a helper method. It doesn't increase access. It doesn't give access to anything that's not already accessible. It just makes it convenient. This class we eventually want to remove, so it's okay for now. So let's go to light trail mode and implement this. Now we'll go to time lapse mode. Actually, we can do it in this abstract video mode. Abstract video mode takes care of it, long exposure takes care of it, and burst already has it, so we are good. Okay, this encapsulation things we'll get to later. Oh, this should be a var. Wait, what is current mode? Oh, it's a type. In another class, we refer to it as current mode type. So let's be consistent. Oops. So when you're checking for light trail mode and time lapse mode, you could instead check for abstract video mode. This is the advantage of is checks rather than double equal to checks, because if you have an object that represents a class, so I'll give you a Java example, right? You have an object O. Now it's better to say if O instance of some class, because this will handle subclasses also, than to say if o dot get class equal to some class dot class, because this checks only this type. So it won't work with inheritance. Okay. I think there are 270 errors you can see here. Let's do this. What's the warning? Okay. Using class. Okay, we are down from 270 to 245 errors. So basically what this says is that this protocol can be implemented only by classes, not by structs or enums or other things. So that's what this any object says. As I was complaining earlier, simply adding keywords like required just to satisfy the compiler doesn't achieve anything. Because it's auto fixed, I don't even know, like logically speaking, what it means. Camera is inaccessible. This doesn't make sense. We are in the same class. How can it be inaccessible? This again doesn't add value because nobody in practice is going to define a class named UI application. This is more of satisfying the compiler. Okay, cannot find session in scope. Yeah, this would be camera dot. Is this really private? And when did it become private? No, it's private set, which means only the setter is private. This doesn't make sense. Oh, camera is inaccessible, not mode. How can camera be inaccessible? Oh, it's here. It's a subclass of abstract video mode. You can see here, it's a private property of the subclass. Ideally, it would be protected, which Swift doesn't have. So we'll have to make it public. Command option square bracket. This is lowercase camera. Yeah, use whatever. the compiler is complaining. I'm blindly clicking the autofix. It's putting some keyword. Okay, fine. And the compiler is accepting its own autofix. So kind of nothing of value got done here. Anyway. Oh, we don't have a reference to the type here. Oh, it's just self. We don't need anything. It's the same thing. Oh, new syntax. Is it correct? I think it's just import AV foundation. Awesome. Oh, why does it not conform to protocol mode? This is not helpful. You should sort these imports. Oh, we just move it to the other one. The other file. I have no idea what this means. No exact matches in call to subscript. I've been doing Swift for years and it's still. Oh, the index type is wrong. This is some other kind of string. iOS has 3 types of strings. There's just string, there's CF string, there's NS string. So if you just do as string, it should work. This is guaranteed to work at runtime, so I don't know, the compiler should ideally insert it itself. If it is something that can fail at runtime, the compiler shouldn't do it automatically for you. But anyway. Ambiguous use of location. What's ambiguous about it? Doesn't say. Oh man. In closures do self in so that you don't need to prefix each access with self. It's a minor cleanup. So these are all the to-dos, but first you should get it to build. If your code is not building it is the first step. Once it builds, if the automated tests are not running, like unit tests or end-to-end tests or integration tests, the first priority is to fix them. Only then do you do further improvements of the code. Tuple pattern cannot match values of non-tuple type. Okay, whatever, man, I don't know. You don't need to do this in self. It's not an any. So this is just a standard iteration, but you are specifying that you want only values that match this, but still the static type is not this. So there are two ways of fixing it. One is you can add another as like this, but that's not type safe and it's redundant. Why are you checking once and casting again? I would say here if let value equal to value as ns dictionary, let's have a page guide at 100. What I'm looking for is whether the diff view is showing on the left or the right. Sorry guys, new text editor, so I'm having to spend time here. Show local division on right side. This is what I'm used to. Okay. Before, after. The left side is the before, the after is the edited version. Okay, so these are, so earlier I was saying why does it say it doesn't conform to the protocol? And if you see here, it tells you what the problem is. Oops, how do you scroll this? Okay, never mind. I thought there's a way to adjust this diff. I'm just trying to drag this. Okay, never mind. User description. Yeah, these first three should be there, but why is it not there? Oh, it's not there because the subclass will implement it. Remember, Swift doesn't have a notion of an abstract class. So when you implement a protocol, you have to implement everything. In a language like Java that does have abstract classes, when you implement a protocol or an interface, as Java engineers call it, you can implement only some of the requirements of the interface. Okay, got it. Okay, remove this. Rotation angle blah 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 is, so wait, it says incorrect label. So in the fast video writer, The first is a float, the second is an int. We are not passing the device. So here, that is why it's saying incorrect label. Fix it. So better man cannot override with a what? I have no idea what this is talking about. No, this is a very small class. Oh, does CL location manager have something called location? Let's just do this. This can't be the thing. I don't think removing this will help. So it is coming from CL location manager. Now you'll get this error. So apparently CL location manager has a property called location and heading. Var location. Oh, it already has location and heading. Var heading. Yes. Was this added later on? No, it's from iOS 2. Okay, so there are two ways of fixing this. One is we can rename these to something else. The other is we don't need this because the base class already has the same things. Which means you don't need this, which means you don't need this, which means you don't need this. Are you implementing anything from this delegate? No, this is our function. Why is it overriding? I don't know what's overriding. Oh, it's a better location manager, so it's a subclass of this with the same interface. Okay, got it. So if you call the base class function, it works in a different way. If you use this instance rather than this instance, this function is overridden to work in a better way, which we won't get into right now. Why it is better, but it is better. So that's why we have an override. Now the 197, if we remove this, the 198, yeah, you don't need to set it as self. Yeah, 197, same. So we don't need to do that, okay? Yeah, here this is what I wanted, the diff view for show assistant, is that what it's called? No. Yeah, why is the side by side? It was already selected, but I clicked it again and it worked. Okay, Xcode bug. Okay, so here it's the same thing. You are iterating, but you are checking if it is this. And yeah, CF dictionary and NS dictionary are the same thing. You just have to write this as to satisfy the compiler. But yeah, if you have a CF dictionary, you can use it as an NS dictionary and vice versa. It won't fail at runtime. The key is used here. What's wrong with this? Okay. Yeah, this set full res format has to be exposed. It can't be here. Okay, now we have to check for filter if possible. Yeah, this can go to the other file. $189. Earlier we were at 190 something. Double. Where is a double defined? I think the project definition is wrong. There has to be a file called etable. Okay, never mind. We'll get to that later. What on earth is this? Okay, 181. Let's see what else is in the. Whenever we open a file, let's see if there's something obvious we can fix it. CG size, extension CG size. It has to have a maximum. var maximum. I think I removed this in a refactoring gone wrong. Return dot maximum of width. Here, when you just say dot, the compiler infers to be CG float dot, because anyway it has to return a CG float. You should qualify it as focus rect dot focus rect moved event. This should work. So here, when you are qualifying it this way, you don't need to repeat focus rect. Okay, does this file compile? Yes, it does. Okay, nice. Okay, this one we'll have to deal with later on. This compiles. Benefits view controller. Did I mess up something in the refactoring? No, only thing I did was remove a comment, so this should be fine. No, nothing got changed after line 91. This is at line 116. Oh wait, if it's a private one, why are we passing the index? I think this would have been written as self dot index plus equal to 1, and I removed the self dot. Okay. So when you remove lazy, this gets initialized when the object gets created rather than on demand, which is fine because white and black aren't going to change. You're creating a label with white on black background. So this doesn't make any I think this is where I kind of messed it up. Here, yes, I wrote self dot index plus equal to 1. Okay, this now works. This is fine. This is fine. This is fine. I don't know what this means. Just a class, sorry, lowercase. Getting weird. Compiler errors. Oh, we are down from 280 something to 160. Oh, we need to func star. Yeah, this should be in CI image, these overloaded operators, to multiply all the pixels of an image with a number and to divide. Not in long exposure Blender. Extension, no. Extension CI. So we need both divide and multiply operators. Return image into 1 by divisor. So the multiply operator is simple. Multiplicand, what's the term? Does multiplicand, does multiplier, is there another term? Okay, we can just call it factor, that's easier. So to multiply by 2, for example, no, so this is the divide operator. To divide by 2, you multiply by 0.5 using this multiply operator. Use terminology correctly. So if you're dividing 20 by 5, 20 is the dividend, 5 is the divisor. So this is the divisor or the factor. So divisor makes more sense. The keyword doesn't matter really here because it's just an overloaded operator. So you have defined these two operators here. CI image and float. Why can't you apply it? That's exactly what it supports. Strange. Actually, we can make it an integer even. What is num frames taken? It's a uint. Yes. So, can we even make it a uint? Because you're never dividing an image by 2.5. If you're averaging two images, right? A and B. You're doing A plus B by 2. So, it's fine. This problem is still there. Huh? CI image and uint. Oh, is it file private? How many changes have we accumulated? Let's see if we can commit some of these. There are too many here for my comfort. Oh, you can't stage. Let's do it here. This is just moved elsewhere. What have we done here? We have added the closing one, which is the closing brace. That's it, I guess. Just indentation change here. I'm not sure whether to do this, whether to put an exclamation here. So controls controller. Line 197. Yeah, this should be this. Because the question mark means if it is nil, do nothing. The exclamation means if it is nil, crash. And it cannot be nil because the exposure bias slider, which is a slider in the UI, it can be dragged only after initialization, at which point it's non-nil. So this is fine. So many Swift engineers put question mark without thinking. That's bad coding practice, because now you have to deal with what happens if it is nil, because then you are performing some of the changes in the function but not the others. Will that leave the app in an inconsistent state? So don't do that. It's not enough to make it compile, right? Yeah, we have earlier it used to be an if. Without the compiler, I refactored it. Yeah. So if it is tally, make it tally. If it is void, If it's ultra wide, make it ultra wide. Oh, I accidentally moved array here. Let me undo it. AV capture device. Okay, here there was no new line at the end of the file. Here there is. Yeah, you have just added set full res format here. This one I don't want to commit yet. Yeah, this is cleaner. You don't have to convert it to float because the implementation of this operator now converts it to float. You have a whole bunch of as calls to satisfy the compiler. Is that it? And you have fixed this implementation. You haven't fixed it, you have just made the compiler happy, like it was correct earlier as well. The modes will commit later on. Missing brace, this one. Yeah, I had written guard else let, okay. Focus rect, a to do has been added. Main view, yeah, you should call it var if you are going to use the syntax. Shutter button, okay. You are not implementing this delegate and you are not assigning itself as the delegate. You don't have these properties, you don't have these callbacks. Wonderful. Let's commit these also because there are some valid changes like importing UIKit and override and so on. You don't need to fix all the compiler errors in this commit, but good to fix some. In abstract video mode, what's the problem here? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I don't think we need this. Oh, make a copy since, okay. See, this is where comments help. Otherwise, I would have removed this. Yeah, class vars don't exist in protocols. Oh, we forgot something. I should have pulled before making these changes in case there was another commit by someone else. Okay, never mind. We have made a good set of changes for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.